The first sound Reed Langston noticed wasn't the rumble of the jet engines. It was the sound of someone switching languages mid-lullaby. It came from the row behind him, soft enough to be private, yet clear enough to carry. First Spanish, then French, then Turkish. The voice moved between languages like water changes form, never breaking rhythm, never faltering. Reed turned slightly, pretending to adjust his seat. What he saw didn't match the voice at all. A young woman, early 20s maybe, sat in coach, rocking a sleeping child against her chest. No jewelry, no laptop. A worn book of translated poems opened beside her. Her lips moved again, this time in Arabic, low and fluid. Reed, who'd spent his life making decisions worth billions, found himself more captivated by a stranger's words than by any market fluctuation. The flight attendant came by with practiced cheer. "Sir, would you like another drink?" He didn't answer. He was listening. When the child stirred and whimpered, the woman whispered again, switching to English now. "It's all right, my love. Just dreams. We're almost there." Her accent was everything and nothing, a trace of London here, a touch of Ankara there, some echo of Madrid. He recognized pieces but not the whole. The linguist in him, buried under years of corporate monotony, leaned forward instinctively, a translation problem wrapped in a heartbeat. When turbulence hit, the captain's announcement came in English, then German. The woman turned toward the elderly couple beside her and calmly repeated it in Italian. "It's just a little air shift, no danger," she told them. They smiled with relief. That was when Reed pressed his call button. "Sir?" the attendant asked. "I need to change seats," he said, eyes still on the woman behind him. "Is there a problem?" "Yes," Reed said. "I can't hear her properly from here." 2 minutes later, he was in the empty aisle seat beside her. Camille Doyle, he learned her name from the boarding pass sticking out of her passport, didn't seem startled, just amused. "Most people move away from children on flights," she said, voice dry but gentle. "Most children don't sound like miniature orchestras," he replied. "Your son speaks 7 languages too?" She smiled faintly. "He only needs 1 for now, hungry. Everything else can wait." Her eyes were brown but alive with unspoken humor, the kind that makes you feel seen and studied all at once. "I heard you translate for the couple earlier," Reed said. "You work in linguistics?" "Once," she said. "Before the rent decided I didn't." The honesty in her tone disarmed him. She didn't flinch or decorate her words. She said them plainly, the way truth sometimes demands to be spoken. "What about you?" she asked. "You sound like someone who writes rules, not follows them." That startled a laugh out of him. "Clothes, I enforce them. Business." "Ah," she said, "the universal language." The boy, maybe 5, stirred and blinked up at Reed. "Mama, is this a new friend?" Camille hesitated. "He's just another passenger, sweetheart." Reed extended a hand anyway. "Reed," the child squinted. "That's a weird name." "I get that a lot," Reed said solemnly, and the boy giggled. For a moment they sat in easy silence, the kind that felt unearned and therefore precious. The hum of the engines folded around them, the world reduced to 3 square feet of shared air. Then Camille's phone buzzed with a message. Reed saw the corner of the screen light up. Words in Turkish. He didn't mean to look, but the headline caught him. "Clinical report. Translation error cost delays." Her expression shifted, something between frustration and grief. "You work with medical techs?" he asked. "I used to," she said quietly. "Freelance translation. I caught an error once that could have cost a patient their life. They thanked me, then stopped hiring me. Too slow, they said." "Too careful," Reed corrected. She tilted her head. "And how would you know?" He didn't answer. He didn't want to tell her that Langston Biotech, the company he built, had lost millions over a mistranslated consent clause last quarter. He didn't want to admit that somewhere, in the wreckage of efficiency, her kind of precision had gone extinct. The captain's voice returned, announcing their descent into Zurich. Camille began gathering her things. A small canvas bag, a children's picture book, a notepad scribbled in 3 alphabets. Reed found himself saying, "I have a meeting tomorrow. Multinational clients. Interpreters keep failing to capture intent. I could use someone who listens the way you do." She blinked, wary. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a seat, he said, at a table where language costs more than lives sometimes. Her smile was cautious, disbelieving. You don't even know if I'm qualified. I just heard you correct 4 continents without leaving your chair, he said. That's qualification enough. She looked at him, then at her son, who was busy whispering to his stuffed giraffe in 2 languages. And what would I do there? Make sure words mean what we say, Reed said simply. That's harder than it sounds. When the plane landed, passengers surged forward, impatient. Camille stayed seated. So did Reed. Finally, she said, I can't promise anything. Good, he said. Promises are overrated. Just come. As they disembarked, Reed glanced back once. Camille was holding her son's hand, walking toward customs. She didn't look back, but he caught the faintest trace of a smile reflected in the terminal glass. For the first time in years, Reed Langston felt something unexpected. Not attraction, not curiosity. It was recognition. He had just met the one person who could translate his entire life and make it sound human again. Camille had never felt so out of place in her life. The Langston Biotech headquarters in Zurich looked less like a company and more like a polished cathedral to precision. Glass, steel, and silence. The kind of place where people walked like their footsteps might scuff the future. Her reflection followed her in every surface, reminding her that she didn't belong among executives in tailored suits and shoes that cost more than her rent. Noah was at the childcare center Reed had arranged, an act of generosity she didn't yet know how to read. Gratitude felt too small, suspicion too heavy. So she settled for focus. She would sit through one meeting, offer her perspective if asked, and then disappear back into the world she understood. A receptionist with the composure of a diplomat led her to the 12th floor. Mr. Langston will be with you shortly, she said, her accent clipped and exact. Camille nodded, clutching her small notebook like a shield. When Reed finally entered, he wasn't the boardroom titan she remembered from headlines. No entourage, no assistant, just a man carrying a paper cup of black coffee and the kind of fatigue that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from too much control. Jet lag? He asked. I've been more tired from less, she said. His mouth twitched, the closest thing to a smile. They're waiting. Who's they? He gestured toward the conference room. People who think language is a footnote. The room was already humming with tension. 12 people sat around an elliptical table, their laptops open like shields. A wall-sized screen projected a dense paragraph of text in 3 languages. At the head sat Daniel Koenig, head of European strategy, whose voice carried the practiced patience of someone used to being right. The clause stands, Koenig said. Legal approved it. We move forward. Camille slid into the last empty chair, trying to make herself invisible. Reed remained standing. Camille Doyle will observe, he announced. Her input is advisory. Koenig glanced at her briefly, then dismissed her entirely. Advisory in what capacity? She's a linguist, Reed said simply. Koenig's smile was diplomatic but thin. We already have translators. Camille inhaled quietly, choosing her tone with care. Translators move words between languages. I move meaning between people. A few heads turned. Koenig didn't flinch. Meaning is contextual, Ms. Doyle. That's why we leave it to experts. Then perhaps your experts should read the French version, she said softly, because it just turned consent into compliance. The room froze. What? Koenig said. She pointed to the screen. In English, the clause says participants agree to ongoing observation. But in French, you've used acceptant la surveillance continue. That literally translates to submit to continuous monitoring. One empowers, the other obeys. Someone muttered, she's right, in German. Camille continued. In Turkish, it's worse. The term implies authorization by the company, not the patient. If you publish this, you're not getting consent. You're asserting control. Koenig's composure cracked just slightly. That's a nuance. It's an ethical failure, she corrected, and it won't survive public review. Silence followed. Then Reed spoke. Rewrite it. Koenig frowned. Mr. Langston, with respect. Rewrite it, Reed repeated. Now. The rest of the meeting moved with a strange gravity. Camille found herself explaining how certain words carried centuries of cultural weight, How in some languages, politeness can disguise power, and in others, directness can sound like disrespect. By the end, even the most skeptical faces had softened. When the session adjourned, Reed caught her as she tried to leave. "You did more than fix a translation," he said. "You stopped us from making a moral mistake." "I just read what was there," she said. He shook his head. "You read what wasn't." They walked through the corridor lined with glass offices. Outside, Zurich glowed pale and expensive. Inside, Reed's reflection looked as tired as hers. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "You have whole departments for this." "Departments can't hear tone," he said. "They hear cost." "You think I can fix that?" "I think you already started." They stopped at the elevator. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was layered, like a page waiting for translation. Finally, she said, "This isn't my world, Mr. Langston." "Neither is mine," he said quietly. "Not anymore." The elevator doors opened, but neither of them moved. For a brief second, Camille saw past the billionaire veneer, a man who built a kingdom and realized too late that he'd lost the language of its people. "You know," she said, "you're very bad at small talk." He smiled then, the first real one she'd seen. "You're very good at saying what matters." When the doors closed between them, Camille exhaled for the first time that day. That night in her small apartment overlooking the river, she replayed the day in her mind while Noah colored beside her. "Mama," he said, holding up a messy drawing of a stick figure beside a tall one. "This is you and your boss." She laughed softly. "He's not my boss." "Then why is he so tall?" "Because he thinks he is," she said. Noah nodded sagely. "He looks like he needs a nap." She smiled. "You're not wrong." As she tucked him into bed, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Reed Langston. You were right about the French clause. Legal's revising the whole protocol. You saved us from a lawsuit before lunch." Then another line, almost hesitant. "You have a gift. Don't downplay it." Camille stared at the screen for a long moment, the glow painting her face in soft light. She typed back, "It's just words." A pause. Then his reply arrived. "That's all anything ever is, until someone makes them mean something." She set the phone down, unable to stop the small, involuntary smile spreading across her face. Outside, the river moved the way her life suddenly felt. Quiet, steady, and heading somewhere she couldn't yet name. The following morning began with the sound of church bells and the quiet certainty that something had changed. Camille stood on her small balcony, coffee cooling in her hand, watching the early commuters slice through the mist. Zurich was a city that seemed incapable of disorder. Its trams glided, its people glowed with purpose. She, by contrast, felt suspended in translation, halfway between disbelief and belonging. Her phone buzzed before she'd even set the mug down. A text from Reed. "Meeting at 10, European strategy, bring your notes." R. No greeting, no signature flourish. Just those clipped commands that somehow read less like orders and more like trust. She hesitated, fingers hovering above the screen, then replied, "I'm not on staff." A minute later, 3 dots appeared, vanished, then reappeared. "You're not replaceable either." When she arrived at headquarters, Reed was already pacing outside the conference room, sleeves rolled, tie gone. He looked different today, less CEO, more man. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he echoed, though his tone carried a fraction of something warmer. "You're about to meet the European board. They don't scare easily." "Neither do I," she said. That earned her a brief smile. "Good. Don't apologize for being right." He opened the door and the conversation inside stopped instantly, as though gravity had shifted. The table was a battlefield of laptops, contracts, and silent judgments. At its center sat Daniel Koenig, his expression unreadable, but his posture a statement in itself, unyielding. "Ms. Doyle," Koenig greeted, voice polite, eyes sharp. "We were just discussing your linguistic adjustments." Camille took her seat. "Adjustments?" Reed's voice was measured. "Daniel believes our previous language was sufficient." "It was legally correct," Koenig said. "You can't run a corporation on philosophy." Camille leaned forward, resting her hands on the table. "Philosophy? I thought we were talking about consent." The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was electric. Words, she continued, are not decorations. They shape behavior. If you tell patients they submit instead of agree, they will behave like subjects, not participants. That changes outcomes. Koenig's jaw flexed. You make it sound moral. It is, she said simply. Language decides who has power. If we ignore that, we're not just mistranslating, we're lying. A low murmur rippled around the room. Reed didn't move, didn't intervene. He just watched her with quiet, almost proud intensity. One of the regional directors cleared his throat. Ms. Doyle, with respect, our translators follow industry standards. Standards built by whom? She asked. People who never have to sign the forms themselves. The director blinked. You're implying bias. I'm implying history, she said, and history always leaks into grammar. By the time she finished explaining her revisions, the room had shifted tone. Doubt had become curiosity. Dismissal had turned to calculation. They weren't ready to concede, but they were listening, and that was enough. Koenig broke first. You talk like a lawyer. I talk like a person who's tired of seeing meaning used as camouflage. Reed finally stood. That's why she's here, he said, to make sure our words tell the truth before they hit the world. He looked around the table, letting the weight of his voice do the rest. Every document now goes through her review. Koenig's brows lifted. Every document? Every language, every clause, Reed said. She has veto authority on anything with human impact. That statement detonated like quiet thunder. When the meeting adjourned, people left in measured clusters, some nodding at Camille in acknowledgement, others pretending not to see her. She gathered her notes, hands steady but pulse unsteady. That was bold, she said once the door closed behind them. Reed tilted his head. You expected me to fold? I expected you to be strategic. I was, he said. Strategy is choosing the right person to fight for what you can't explain. She blinked, unsure whether to take that as flattery or confession. Later that afternoon, Reed called her into his office. The view stretched across the city like a reward for obedience. He didn't sit behind the desk. He stood by the window, coffee untouched. I read your annotations, he said. Half of them sound like philosophy, half like poetry. Maybe that's what language ethics is, she said. The bridge between rules and conscience. He turned toward her. And you think that can fit in a corporation? Only if someone holds it there. His eyes softened. And you're volunteering for that? I'm not volunteering, she said. I'm just refusing to stay silent. Reed studied her for a long moment, then crossed the room. Daniel will fight this. He doesn't like being challenged. Then he shouldn't build policies out of arrogance, she said. He'll lose. You sound confident. I'm right, she said simply. He smiled again. That same flicker of amusement he rarely allowed. You remind me of someone. Your lawyer? My conscience, he said. She didn't know how to answer that. That evening back at her apartment, Noah greeted her with a question. Did you win? Win what? Your words fight, he said matter-of-factly, waving his toy plane like punctuation. Camille laughed softly. Maybe. For today. He nodded sagely. Then you're brave. She tucked him into bed later, humming the same lullaby she had sung on that flight. Only this time, she didn't switch languages halfway through. When her phone buzzed again, she didn't need to check the name. Reed, you changed the meeting. They listened. That doesn't happen often, she replied. Maybe they just needed translation. A pause, then. Maybe I did too. Camille stared at that message for a long time, then typed the simplest response she could think of. Then keep listening. And somewhere across the city she liked to imagine he did. The email came at dawn. No greeting, no signature, just 4 lines of polite sabotage. Her role has not been formally authorized under Zurich operations. Please clarify the scope of her access. Camille stared at the message on her phone, rereading it until the words blurred. It was written in the kind of corporate diplomacy that reeked of cowardice. Anonymous, indirect, but sharp enough to bleed authority from whoever it targeted. She didn't need to ask who sent it. Daniel Koenig. The man had smiled through clenched teeth in every meeting since she'd corrected his translation in front of Reed. He was too seasoned to confront her openly, So he'd done what men like him always did, weaponized bureaucracy. By the time she reached the office, the tension was already circulating like recycled air. Conversations paused when she entered. Eyes slid away. She'd been around enough politics to recognize the choreography of rumor. Reed was in Geneva for a day of investor briefings, unreachable. It figured. She opened her laptop, reread the email, and drafted a reply, but stopped after the first sentence. No, that was the trap. The moment she defended herself, she'd validated the accusation that she didn't belong. Instead, she stood, smoothed her blazer, and walked straight to Daniel's glass-walled office. He looked up as she entered, surprise flickering behind his composure. "Ms. Doyle, I wasn't expecting an unscheduled meeting," she said evenly. "That makes two of us." He gestured to a chair. "Please." She remained standing. "I read your email." He leaned back, feigning confusion. "Email? Don't insult my intelligence," she said. "You can hide behind policy, but syntax betrays authorship. You use the same passive construction you always do when you're being defensive." His smile tightened. "I merely raised a procedural concern. We have protocols for staff onboarding. You am not staff," she finished. "Yes, I've heard. I'm the inconvenient variable that doesn't fit your hierarchy." Daniel folded his hands, posture calm, voice just this side of condescension. "Ms. Doyle, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but we can't allow informal influence to override structure. The board prefers consistency." "Consistency," she repeated softly. "You mean obedience." "I mean governance." "You mean fear," she said, her voice lowering, "because it terrifies you that someone without a title can expose what you've missed for years." For a moment, silence pulsed between them. Then she leaned forward, both palms on his desk. "Let me make this easy for you," she said. "If you think I'm unqualified, challenge my work, not my existence. You want a review of my access? Fine. Start with every document I've corrected, every clause that could have cost this company millions or lives. Start there. Then we can talk about authorization." His jaw tightened. "Power," she continued, "is just translation everyone agrees on. And you've been mistranslating it for too long." Then she turned and walked out, leaving him blinking at the wreckage of his own composure. By noon, the email had mysteriously disappeared from the internal server. When Reed returned that evening, he called her into his office without preamble. "I heard you confronted Koenig," he said. "I didn't confront him," she said. "I corrected him." Reed's mouth twitched, the faintest ghost of amusement. "He claims you accused him of sabotage." "I didn't need to," she said. "He knows he did." He studied her for a long moment, then walked to his desk. "You know, in this company, most people survive by not being noticed." "I'm not here to survive," she said quietly. "I'm here to make meaning clear." Reed nodded once. "Then let's make it official." He handed her a thin folder, Langston Biotech letterhead, her name printed cleanly at the top. Title, Chief Linguistic Ethicist. Reporting to CEO. Mandate, oversight of all global communication policy and consent language. Independent Review Authority. Camille blinked. "Reed, this is necessary," he said simply. "They can't question what's written in policy." Her throat tightened. "You didn't have to." "Yes," he said, cutting her off. "I did. Because people like Koenig only understand legitimacy when it comes with a stamp." She exhaled slowly. "You just made enemies." He met her eyes. "So did you." For a moment, neither spoke. Then he added quieter, "But you also made this place honest. That's worth more than approval." Something in her chest loosened, a tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying since the flight. That night, back at her apartment, she sat on the couch with the folder open on her lap. Noah was drawing beside her, humming to himself. "Mama," he said, "are you famous now?" She smiled faintly. "No, just louder." He frowned in concentration. "What's a linguistic ethicist?" "It means," she said, choosing her words carefully, "I help people tell the truth in every language." Noah looked up at her, serious in the way only a child can be. "Then you're like a superhero." "Something like that," she said softly. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Reed. I filed your appointment with the board. Official tomorrow." Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you do. She typed a response, paused, then deleted it. Some words didn't need to be written. Instead, she looked at Noah, whose eyelids were already drooping, and whispered, "Good night, my little translator." When she closed the folder, her reflection in the glass window no longer looked like a visitor. She looked like someone who'd finally found the right language and refused to let anyone rewrite her again. The following week arrived with the kind of quiet that hides storms. Camille's new title spread through the company faster than any official announcement. By Monday morning, people greeted her differently, some with thin smiles, others with averted eyes. Every department now sent her their documents before release, each carrying the subtle resentment of being reviewed. She tried to ignore it. She had real work to do, words to fix. In her inbox sat a draft of an international partnership statement. The text looked harmless at first, dense, polite, filled with the diplomatic gloss she'd come to expect. But the final paragraph made her stop. "We commit to responsible oversight of subjects within all research territories." Subjects, again. Camille leaned back, exhaling. One word, one assumption. She replaced it with participants, then added a footnote clarifying voluntary consent. Language didn't just communicate, it encoded power, and she wasn't going to let power hide behind civility. When she sent the revision, an executive replied within minutes. "Appreciate the edit. Legal prefers the original wording, less ambiguity." Camille typed back immediately. "It's not ambiguous, it's accurate. There's a difference." No response came, but an hour later, Reed appeared at her office door. He didn't knock. He never did. "You're already fighting with legal," he said, setting down a coffee for her. "I'm not fighting," she said. "I'm teaching them nouns have ethics." He smiled. "You sound like a philosopher." "I'm a translator. It's the same thing." Reed sat across from her, posture relaxed in that carefully disciplined way of his. "They'll resist you," he said. "Change always feels like blame." "Good," she said. "Maybe they should feel blamed." That made him laugh, low and genuine. "You're dangerous, Camille Doyle." "Only to hypocrisy." Their eyes met for a moment, too long before Reed stood. "We have a board dinner tomorrow. Geneva. I want you there." "I'm not part of the board." "You're part of the truth," he said simply, and walked out. The Geneva evening arrived silver and cold. The restaurant sat by the lake, glass walls framing the city lights like jewelry. Camille wore the one black dress she owned, the same one she'd worn to a university lecture years ago, back when she still believed intellect could pay rent. Reed met her at the entrance. No tie, coat draped over his arm. He looked like he belonged everywhere and nowhere at once. "You clean up well," he said. "So do you," she replied, then added dryly, "though I suspect yours came with a tailor." He grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment." The dinner was all polished conversation and unspoken hierarchies. Executives laughed too loudly at nothing. The air smelled of money and performance. Camille said little, observing instead. Reed watched her from across the table, the faintest flicker of pride in his eyes. When the talk turned to her role, someone asked, "So, Miss Doyle, you're the company's moral compass now?" She smiled. "I prefer linguistic janitor. I clean up messes before anyone slips on them." Laughter circled the table, genuine, then awkward. But Reed's expression stayed still, measuring the reactions like a conductor keeping tempo. Later, as the dinner wound down, he joined her by the window. The lake shimmered under streetlights, motionless but alive. "You handled them well," he said quietly. "I've learned to translate arrogance into civility." "Another dangerous skill," he murmured. She turned to him. "Reed, can I ask something?" "Always. Why do you keep defending me?" His answer was slow, deliberate. "Because you remind me that precision isn't the same as truth. I've built a company on control. You made me realize control isn't clarity." Camille blinked, caught off guard. "That's a rare confession." He looked away out at the water. "Don't make me regret it." "You won't," she said softly. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, a tram bell echoed faintly across the bridge. Reed's reflection shimmered beside hers in the glass. Two figures caught between translation and silence. Back in Zurich, the days blurred into motion. Camille's authority became both shield and target. Departments grudgingly began adopting her linguistic standards. Legal stopped arguing. Even Daniel Koenig, resentful, precise, began sending her documents without comment. Progress came quietly, one word at a time. One afternoon, Reed stopped by again, holding a printed report. "You'll want to see this," he said. The report summarized recent regulatory feedback. At the bottom, a single note stood out. Langston Biotech commended for unprecedented transparency in patient communication. Camille read it twice. "They noticed." "They did," he said. "And so did investors." She smiled faintly. "Imagine that. Ethics with market value." "Don't sound so surprised," when he said. "Honesty sells better than secrecy." "Only when someone's brave enough to publish it." Reed leaned against the doorframe. "Maybe that's our next translation, turning courage into policy." She looked up at him, the light from the window catching the edges of his expression. "Careful, Reed. You're starting to sound like me." He smiled. "That's the plan." That evening, Camille walked home along the river. The air was cool, clean, threaded with the smell of rain. She thought of her first day on the flight, how far away that woman seemed now, the one who spoke softly in 7 languages but never once for herself. At the crosswalk, her phone buzzed with a new message. "R. Good work today. You're making this company worth understanding." She typed back, "C. Maybe one day it'll speak for itself." A moment later, "R. With your help, it already does." She smiled into the quiet, the city lights reflected in the water, like untranslatable poetry. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just correcting words anymore. She was rewriting how the world listened. The snow fell quietly over Geneva, soft as punctuation. Camille stood outside the cafe by the lake, watching the flakes melt on her gloves. Reed had asked her to meet off-site for what he called an informal conversation. That word, informal, didn't suit him. Reed Langston carried formality like a second skin. Even his silences felt signed and sealed. When he arrived, he wasn't the man she expected. No suit, no phone glued to his hand. Just a dark wool coat, collar turned up, hair slightly disheveled. For once, he looked almost reachable. "You walked?" she asked as he brushed snow from his shoulders. "Trying to remember what that feels like," he said. "The car makes everything too straight." She smiled faintly. "You're talking like a man who's starting to like detours." He gestured toward the cafe door. "Come on. Before I remember, I hate small talk." Inside, warmth met them in a rush. Espresso, wood polish, the hum of quiet conversations. They found a corner table by the window, the lake beyond a mirror of gray. "So," Camille said, wrapping her hands around the coffee cup, "why are we here instead of the office?" Reed stirred his drink but didn't answer right away. "I wanted to talk to you without 10 people waiting to interpret me." "That's a dangerous habit," she said lightly. "You might start sounding human." He glanced up, amusement flickering. "I've been accused of worse." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, listening to the low murmur of the cafe. Reed watched the world outside, his reflection faint in the glass. "You ever wonder," he said, "if language is just a wall we keep repainting? We say connection, but what we really build is separation with grammar." Camille tilted her head. "That sounds like something a man says when he's forgotten how to listen." "Maybe," he said, "or maybe I'm learning to hear differently." Something about his tone, unpolished, searching, made her chest tighten. He wasn't the CEO now. He was a man halfway through unlearning his own vocabulary. They spent the afternoon walking through the old quarter. The street smelled of roasted chestnuts and cold stone. Noah trailed ahead, skipping from one cobblestone to the next, his laughter bouncing off the walls like punctuation marks in motion. Reed watched him, a rare smile tugging at his mouth. "He's fearless." "He's 5, Camille said. "He doesn't know fear has better lawyers." Reed chuckled, hands deep in his coat pockets. "You've raised him well." She shrugged. "I'm mostly improvising." "That's all parenting is," he said. "Improvised stability." They reached a small park overlooking the lake. Snow covered the benches in perfect, untouched layers. Noah began sculpting a crooked snowman with intense concentration. Reed crouched beside him, rolling a smaller snowball for the head. Make sure he has ears, Noah instructed, so he can listen. Reed looked up at Camille. Smart kid. He gets that from his father, she said softly, then realized too late how the words sounded. Reed's expression didn't change, but something subtle shifted in the air. You never talk about him. There's not much to say. She paused, then added, he left before Noah could say goodbye in any language. Reed straightened slowly. I'm sorry. She smiled, gentle, tired. Don't be. Some absences are easier to live with than half presences. He nodded, eyes lowering. I understand that more than I should. They fell into silence again, but it wasn't heavy. The snow softened everything, even regret. When Noah finished his snowman, he looked up proudly. He needs a name. Mr. Consent Clause, Reed said dryly. Camille laughed, shaking her head. That's terrible. Noah grinned. I like it, Reed winked. You see? We're raising an ethicist. Later, as dusk fell, they ducked into a small bookstore to warm up. The place smelled of old paper and time. Reed wandered to the philosophy section while Camille browsed children's books with Noah. When she turned, she found him holding a thin volume of translated poetry. Listen to this, he said, reading softly. Some people speak to be heard, others speak to be understood, but the rarest speak to make silence less lonely. Camille met his eyes. Beautiful, she said. Who wrote it? He closed the book. Someone who must have known you. The moment stretched, delicate and unspoken. Outside, bells began to ring for the evening mass. Noah tugged her sleeve, breaking the spell. Mama, can we buy it? Reed smiled. Already done. He handed the book to the cashier before Camille could protest. They walked back to the hotel under a sky of slow-falling light. Noah ran ahead, his small footprints vanishing behind him as snow filled them in. You didn't have to buy that, Camille said quietly. I wanted to, Reed replied. Every time I read it, I'll remember this day. Why? He looked at her then, eyes steady. Because for once the world felt like it was translating itself correctly. Her breath caught. Reed, he smiled faintly. Don't worry, I'm not asking for anything. Just, appreciating that you exist. It was such a simple sentence, yet it landed with the weight of something irrevocable. Back in her room after Noah fell asleep, Camille opened the book. On the inside cover, in Reed's handwriting, was a single line. For the woman who taught me that clarity is another word for courage. She traced the words with her fingertips, heart tightening in quiet recognition. Outside, Geneva gleamed under a blanket of white, and for the first time in years, Camille allowed herself to believe in warmth that didn't demand anything in return. The next morning, Camille awoke to the sound of her phone vibrating on the nightstand. The light through the curtains was still dim, blue-gray, the color of cold reason. She reached for it, half asleep, then froze when she saw the name on the screen. Daniel Koenig. She hesitated before answering. Ms. Doyle, he said, voice clipped, efficient. We have a situation. Good morning to you too, she murmured. What kind of situation? The Ministry of Health has flagged our multilingual patient documents. They claim inconsistencies between the German and Turkish versions of the informed consent forms. Camille sat upright. What kind of inconsistencies? The kind that imply liability. Her pulse quickened. Send them to me now. They already called Reed, Koenig added, tone sharpened. He's on his way back from Basel. You might want to prepare an explanation. The line went dead. Within an hour, Camille was in the Zurich office, her desk covered with printed forms. Columns of text in 3 languages, each slightly off from the next. She read fast, pen in hand, crossing out, circling, annotating like her life depended on syntax. She found it on page 5. In the Turkish translation, the phrase may withdraw at any time had become may be withdrawn. One word, one shift of agency. Consent turned into permission. Voluntary became revocable. She felt sick. When Reed arrived, he didn't ask for greetings. Tell me what happened, he said. She handed him the marked-up form. Someone revised my translation before submission. Look here. The verb was changed. It's deliberate. He scanned it, jaw tightening. Koenig? I can't prove it yet, she said, But this isn't a typo. It's sabotage. Reed's eyes darkened. The ministry's demanding an immediate review. They're threatening to suspend approval on the entire Geneva trial. That could kill months of research, she said. It could kill our reputation, he replied. She met his gaze. Then let me fix it. The next 12 hours blurred into a storm of caffeine, code switching, and crisis control. Camille sat in the language lab surrounded by open laptops, alternating between legal dictionaries and medical terminology databases. Every clause had to be re-verified: French, Turkish, German, English. By midnight, she'd reconstructed the entire set from her original files. Exhausted but steady, she printed the corrected copies and dropped them on Reed's desk. He looked at the stack, then at her. You've been here all night. I'll rest when the meeting does, she said. He smiled faintly, though his eyes were shadowed. You're relentless. Only when something matters. Reed exhaled. This, what you did, it'll save us. Maybe, she said quietly, but someone wanted it broken. You can't ignore that. He leaned back in his chair, voice low. I won't. The following day brought press inquiries. The ministry confirmed the issue had been resolved internally, but rumors spread fast. Phrases like internal dispute and translation negligence whispered across trade networks. Camille watched from her office window as Reed addressed the board in the conference room below. She couldn't hear his words, but she could read the posture. Firm, commanding, protective. The language of leadership. When he emerged, he went straight to her. We're clear, he said. The ministry accepted the revisions. And Koenig, she asked. He hesitated. Resigned this morning. Claimed stress. Camille didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth was obvious and ugly. You didn't fire him. I didn't have to, Reed said. People like him can't survive in rooms where words are audited. She gave a tired laugh. Maybe I should start teaching classes. He smiled. You already are. That evening, Reed drove her home. The city lights flickered across the windshield, reflecting off the snow like static. You know, he said quietly, you didn't just save a company. You saved me from becoming the kind of man who'd rather cover mistakes than correct them. She turned to look at him. You were never that man. He smiled, faint but real. You'd be surprised what power does to people. I'd be surprised if you stopped listening, she said softly. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was fluent, its own language, shaped by trust and exhaustion. At her building, she reached for the door handle, but he caught her hand. Camille. She turned back. He hesitated, words caught in his throat. Then, if this ever becomes too much, if you ever feel you're fighting alone, don't. I'm here. Her chest tightened. I know. When she stepped out into the cold, the air felt heavier but cleaner, like something in the world had just translated itself correctly again. Inside her apartment, Noah was asleep on the couch, blanket sliding off his shoulder. She tucked it around him, watching the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Then she saw the book Reed had bought in Geneva, lying open beside him. A line was underlined in faint pencil. Even silence has a grammar. It tells you who's willing to wait. Camille smiled through the fatigue. Outside, snow was falling again, quiet and deliberate. Every flake a word landing softly on the city that was finally beginning to listen. The headlines broke 2 days later. Langston Biotech under ethics review for translation error. Consent form mistranslation. Prompts regulatory inquiry. Camille stared at the glowing screen in disbelief. She'd fixed the forms, rewritten them line by line. But the internet didn't care about context. It only needed a headline. Her phone vibrated nonstop. Calls from journalists, emails from compliance officers, even a message from her old linguistics professor. You're trending, Camille. I wish it were for your book. By mid-morning, Reed called her into his office. He looked composed, but his tie was loose, and his voice carried the weight of damage control. They're spinning it as negligence, he said. Some outlets claim the mistranslation caused a delay in patient treatment. It didn't, she said. The trial never reached that phase. They don't care, he replied quietly. Narratives spread faster than facts. Camille paced the floor. So what happens now? An internal ethics hearing. The board wants a public statement, and they want you there. She froze. They think this was my fault. He met her eyes. They're afraid of taking blame themselves. You're the new variable. They can redirect it. Camille's pulse thudded in her ears. Then I'll go, she said, and I'll tell the truth. Reed frowned. Camille. No, she interrupted. If I let them twist this, I'm no better than the people who built those forms wrong in the first place. Something in his expression softened. Admiration mixed with fear. Then I'll be beside you. The hearing took place that Friday in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the frozen river. The board sat like a tribunal, 8 people in tailored restraint, their faces unreadable. Reed opened the session with a summary of events, the error, the correction, the swift response. Then he gestured toward Camille. Ms. Doyle will clarify the linguistic context. She stood, palms slightly damp, and began. The mistranslation in question was not an oversight, she said evenly. It was a deliberate edit made after my submission. The phrase may withdraw was altered to may be withdrawn. That's not a mistake. It's a power shift. A board member, a woman with a clipped British accent, leaned forward. Do you have proof of intent? No, Camille admitted, but I have pattern. The same phrasing appeared in several prior drafts, always reverting to control-oriented language. It's the same logic that makes patients property. Another member asked, are you suggesting corporate manipulation? I'm suggesting carelessness disguised as efficiency, she said. And it's everywhere. This isn't just one form. It's how systems learn to speak cruelty fluently. A hush settled over the room. Even Reed looked momentarily taken aback. The chairman cleared his throat. That's a bold claim, Ms. Doyle. It's not bold, she said quietly. It's translation. After the meeting, Camille stepped out into the corridor, heart still racing. She found Reed waiting by the elevator, his tie gone, expression unreadable. You just dismantled corporate diplomacy in 12 minutes, he said. Was I wrong? No, he said. You were magnificent. She exhaled shakily. They won't see it that way. Maybe not, he admitted, but they can't unhear you. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face before catching himself. The gesture hung between them, too careful to be accidental, too restrained to be impulsive. Go home, he said softly. Rest. I'll handle the aftermath. But rest didn't come. That night, Camille sat by her window, watching the snow swirl through the streetlights like scattered paper. Her phone buzzed again, a message from an unknown number. You should have stayed quiet. People lose careers over less. No signature, no traceable address. Her stomach clenched. She forwarded the message to Reed with 2 words. Who sent this? He replied almost instantly. I'll find out. Don't answer anyone else tonight. Lock your door. Camille did as he said, though the unease lingered long after. Somewhere out there, someone wanted her silence, and she wasn't sure whether it was fear or fury that kept her awake. By morning, the storm had passed, but the news hadn't. Langston Biotech issued a carefully worded statement. We take full responsibility for the translation error and have implemented new oversight protocols under the guidance of Chief Linguistic Ethicist Camille Doyle. The media spun it differently. Single mother saves biotech firm from ethical collapse. Her inbox flooded again, this time with gratitude. Patients, linguists, even strangers. One message stood out. I work in legal translation. What you said in that hearing, it changed how I see my job. Thank you. Camille read it twice, then smiled faintly. At noon, Reed appeared at her door, sleeves rolled, exhaustion shadowing his face. The board's decided, he said. They're closing the inquiry. Officially, we're in the clear. And unofficially, he hesitated. You've made powerful allies and a few quiet enemies. I can live with that, she said. Reed studied her for a long moment. Most people couldn't. I'm not most people. He smiled faintly. No, you're not. As he turned to leave, she said, Reed? He paused. You said once that words shape behavior. You were right. Today proved it. He nodded, voice low. And you proved that truth survives translation. That night, Camille walked Noah to the riverside, where the ice had begun to crack under the faint promise of spring. "Mama," he said, "is your job over now?" She smiled. "No, sweetheart. It's just beginning." He nodded solemnly, as if that made perfect sense. She looked out over the thawing water, the city lights reflecting like scattered alphabets. And for the first time since all of this began, she didn't feel like she was translating her life anymore. She was living it in the one language that mattered most: truth. The weeks that followed blurred into motion: press calls, policy rewrites, quiet congratulations whispered in hallways by people who once avoided her gaze. Camille had become both legend and cautionary tale. The outsider who corrected the system, the woman who spoke too plainly for comfort. Langston Biotech moved forward, but not without scars. The ministry now required full multilingual audits. Investors demanded new transparency measures. What had once been a private company was now a public example. And Reed Langston was the man standing in the center of the storm, still refusing to flinch. Camille watched him from across the boardroom during a quarterly briefing. He looked the same, calm, confident, but she could tell the weight was pressing harder now. Every headline carried his name. Every success and failure alike echoed against it. When the meeting ended, he lingered by the window, eyes on the skyline. She joined him quietly. "You haven't been sleeping," she said. He smiled without looking at her. "Says the woman who emails revisions at 2 a.m. "Touché," she said softly. Then, "You're burning yourself out. So are you. Difference is, I didn't build this place." He turned to her then, gaze steady. "No, you rebuilt it." There was something in his tone, gratitude, admiration, something that made the air feel charged. She looked away first. "We both did." That evening, Reed invited her to dinner. Not at a restaurant this time, but his apartment overlooking the Limit River. She almost said no, but curiosity outweighed caution. When she arrived, the place surprised her. It wasn't sterile like she'd imagined. Books lined the walls, not business manuals, but poetry, languages, philosophy. A violin rested near the window. "You play?" she asked. "Badly," he admitted, "but it reminds me I'm still capable of learning." He poured her wine, motioning toward the balcony. "Come on, the city looks better from here." Outside, Zurich stretched beneath them, glimmering and alive, reflected in the slow-moving river. The winter had begun to break. The air held a promise of thaw. "It's strange," Camille said, leaning on the railing. "A few months ago, I was translating medical reports in my kitchen. Now I'm rewriting corporate ethics with a billionaire." Reed smiled faintly. "And I'm finally listening to someone who tells me when I'm wrong." "Must be exhausting," she teased. He chuckled. "Liberating, actually." They fell into silence then, not awkward, but filled with quiet understanding. Somewhere below, a tram bell echoed, faint and rhythmic. "Camille," he said finally, "do you ever think about what comes next?" She turned to him. "You mean after this? After the headlines fade?" "Yes. I think about Noah," she said. "About building a life that isn't survival disguised as routine." He nodded slowly. "And for you?" She hesitated. "You built an empire, Reed. I'm just trying to build meaning." "Maybe they're the same thing," he said quietly. "No," she replied. "You can own everything and still not understand what it's worth." He studied her, the city lights reflected in his eyes. "Then tell me what is." She met his gaze. "Integrity, curiosity, the courage to stay kind in a world that rewards indifference." He smiled almost wistfully. "You make that sound like wealth." "It is," she said. The wind caught her hair then, loose and unguarded. For a brief, fragile moment, Reed reached out and tucked a strand behind her ear. His hand lingered, then withdrew, like someone translating a sentence and realizing the words carried too much risk. "Camille," he began, voice low, uncertain. "If things were different—" "They're not," she said gently, saving him the trouble. He nodded once. "No offense taken, only understanding." "You really don't let anyone finish their sentences, do you?" "Only when I already know how they end." He laughed, the sound quiet but real. "You're impossible. I've been called worse." Later, as she was leaving, Reed handed her a small envelope. "Don't open it yet," he said. "Read it tomorrow." She frowned but took it. "You're not resigning, are you?" "Not yet," he said. "Go home, Camille." At dawn, she opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. No company letterhead, no formalities. Just handwriting. Camille, when we first met, I thought you were fluent in words. I was wrong. You're fluent in truth. And that's rarer than anything money can buy. Whatever happens next, whether you stay here or go, I hope you never stop teaching people like me how to listen. She folded the page carefully, setting it beside her coffee mug. The apartment was quiet except for Noah humming in the next room. Her phone buzzed. A notification from the ministry. A new translation initiative proposal. An open collaboration between private firms and linguistic ethicists. At the bottom of the message, submitted by Reed Langston. She smiled faintly. So this is what listening looks like, she murmured. Outside, the river was no longer frozen. Water moved freely now, reshaping its own path. For the first time, Camille felt the same inside her. Unbound, unfinished, finally fluent in something that wasn't fear. The spring sun arrived like an apology, warm, tentative, and late. Camille walked through the Langston Biotech atrium one last time, the echo of her footsteps swallowed by the glass and steel. The walls gleamed with the company's new motto, printed in 6 languages. Truth translates. She had written it herself. Reed had insisted it become their official creed. But seeing it now, embossed in corporate, she felt something bittersweet. Her words didn't belong to her anymore. They had entered the world, independent, transformed. At the reception desk, the clerk smiled. Leaving early today, Miss Doyle? Camille nodded. For good. The woman's eyes widened. You're resigning. Transitioning, Camille said gently. Words matter, right? She smiled, waved, and headed for the elevator. Reed's office was brighter than usual, sunlight spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He was standing by the window when she entered, coat on, expression unreadable. I was hoping you'd come, he said. I figured you'd want to hear it from me. He turned, and the sight of her, calm, decisive, glowing with something beyond exhaustion, made him hesitate. You don't have to go, he said quietly. We just launched the ethics program. You're the reason it exists. And that's why I can leave, she said. It'll survive now. It doesn't need me to prove it's real. He studied her face, searching for argument, but she gave him none. Where will you go? He asked. She smiled faintly. Geneva, for a start. There's a translation initiative forming. They want to apply linguistic ethics to humanitarian work, refugee documentation, asylum applications. Real lives, not contracts. That sounds like you, he said. And you? He looked back at the city. Langston will keep running, but differently. I've been offered a seat on the Global Health Council. I think I'll take it. She tilted her head. So you'll be translating too? Maybe I learned from the best. A silence stretched between them, soft and full. You changed everything, Camille, he said finally. Not just the company, me. She smiled gently. Then it was worth it. Reed stepped closer, but not too close. If we met under different circumstances, you'd still be impossible, she said, saving him the confession. He laughed, the sound low and familiar. And you'd still interrupt me. That's how I show affection. He met her eyes. Then don't stop. For a moment, the world felt still. Then Camille took a breath, extended her hand, and said softly, Goodbye, Reed. He looked at her hand, then ignored it completely, pulling her into an embrace instead. It wasn't romantic. It was recognition. Gratitude shaped into contact. The kind of gesture two people share when they've already said everything that needed saying. When they parted, his voice was quiet. You'll come back. Only if you start misusing verbs again. He smiled. I'll miss that threat. By afternoon, Camille was at the airport with Noah, passports in hand. The terminal hummed with overlapping languages, English, German, Turkish, Arabic. Every voice a reminder of why she was doing this. Are you nervous, Mama? Noah asked as they waited to board. A little. Because of the plane? No, she said. Because of what comes after. He thought about that, serious as ever. You always fix things with words. You'll be fine, she smiled. You think so? I know so, he said with the fierce certainty only a child can have. As they boarded, Camille looked out through the window at the tarmac. The planes shimmered in the afternoon light, tails lined like punctuation marks waiting to send a message skyward. For the first time since the flight where it all began, she wasn't running from something. She was flying toward it. Weeks later, a letter arrived at her new apartment in Geneva. No sender name, but she recognized the handwriting immediately. Camille, we finished the audit. Every document passes. Even the ministry complimented our clarity. You should know, your name's on the plaque in the Zurich lobby, under the motto. It reads, "For the woman who taught us that truth needs translation." No signature necessary. She smiled, folded the letter, and tucked it between the pages of the poetry book Reed had once bought her. Outside her window, the city buzzed with multilingual life. Children shouting in French, vendors haggling in Italian, an old man singing in Arabic by the river. The symphony of misunderstanding and miracle. Camille opened her notebook and began writing again. New essays, new frameworks, new stories about how language could heal more than it harmed. Each page felt lighter than the last. That night, as Noah drifted to sleep, he mumbled drowsily, "Mama, what's your favorite word?" She thought for a moment, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Maybe listen. It's the beginning of every language." He smiled sleepily. "Then it's mine too." When he was asleep, Camille looked out the window. The moonlight spilled across the desk, glinting off her pen. She whispered into the quiet, "Not as prayer, but as punctuation. Everything translates if you care enough to try." The city outside hummed its thousand tongues, and somewhere across the border, in an office high above Zurich, a man read her words on a plaque and smiled. No signature necessary.